Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Crazy Cat Lady, and in this video, I will discuss the plagiarism of author Cheryln Cadle and her self-published book on the Watts family murder case, Letters from Christopher, from a historical perspective on this case. Before I get started, let me briefly mention that I recall Cadle stating that she used Amazon's CreateSpace to publish her book. CreateSpace is a tool put out by Amazon for authors that allows writers to upload manuscripts in the same way YouTube allows people to upload videos. It is Amazon that makes the final determination to continue or terminate publication of a book, just as it is YouTube that makes the decision to publish or discontinue videos. Recently, YouTube announced new harassment terms and services to include bashing the victims and their kin of a major violent event. For example, Alex Jones of InfoWars was banned from YouTube for repeatedly claiming that the families of the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre in Connecticut in December of 2012 were crisis actors and that the tragedy never really occurred. I explored this new reporting feature and discovered that when you report a video to YouTube by clicking on the three dots at the bottom right corner of the video, you will find the new option to report the content for violating terms of service with regard to victims and their families of major crimes or major violent acts. So within that context, it should be mentioned that Cheryln Cadle was, at one time, a Chris Watts sympathizer. She even offered to donate proceeds from her book for an appeal. The announcement of Cadle's book on Chris Watts premiered on a YouTube channel put out by a woman who calls herself the Critical K. Critical K was also a one-time Watts sympathizer, but worse, she vehemently bashed the victim, Chris Watts' wife, Shanann, even going so far as to call Shanann a narcissistic piece of trash. She said Shanann was responsible for putting herself where she is now, meaning in the grave. She said she could envision Shanann in the grave with her butt sticking up in the air and her tongue sticking out of her mouth. She capitalized on this tragedy by creating huge Facebook groups of Shanann bashers to subscribe to her YouTube channel, which is monetized with advertisers. Any and all of the Critical K videos bashing Shanann should be reporting to YouTube, just as another Shanann basher named Miss Mensa was reported to YouTube, and her channel was banned. That's a brief history of the slander and misinformation surrounding this case. Now I will move on to the issue at hand. Cheryln Cadle's plagiarism of a book titled In His Garden, Conversations with a Serial Killer by Ann Howard, who is an attorney. Howard's book was published a little more than a year ago. The original disclosure of the plagiarism was through a YouTube video created by a woman who only goes by the name Kimberly on her YouTube channel. Kimberly was providing a synopsis of Cadle's book chapter by chapter, and when she was almost finished with this project, she stumbled across Howard's book and noticed that paragraphs of Cadle's book were copied and pasted from Howard's book, just as Cadle had copied and pasted from the Discovery, according to Kimberly. It isn't clear to me how exactly Kimberly found Howard's book, but I'll leave that to her to explain that. I chose not to read Cadle's book. I found it to be rather boring, and instead I listened to Kimberly's synopsis of the book. So now we have to backtrack a little bit to when I believe the quote-unquote real quest for the truth about the Chris Watts case began on social media. On May 6, 2019, criminal defense attorney Scott Reich put out a YouTube video titled Open Letter to Chris Watts. Mr. Reich offered Chris Watts the opportunity to call him collect, but it was stipulated on the fact that Chris had to tell him the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. At 8 minutes and 50 seconds in the video, Mr. Reich says, we can record a confession for crime talk. At 9 minutes and 15 seconds, he says verbatim, quote, we won't let you off the way police interrogators did, and we won't allow you to adopt a story that they have presented, end quote. But most importantly, to me anyhow, is Mr. Reich's statement at 11 minutes and 5 seconds. Quote, the only way you can have true forgiveness from others is that you have to tell the truth, end quote. Excuse me. This is the very definition of Christianity, which Chris Watts claims he has adopted in prison. Reich's video was a bit of a bombshell because Chris had been claiming he was reading the Bible, that he'd been forgiven, and did not want people to judge him. But aside from Watts sympathizers and Shanann bashers, no one believed he had ever told the truth. Ultimately, FBI and CBI agents did believe he was telling the truth in his second confession, the prison confession, and apparently so did Cheryln Cadle. The strategy used thus far by Chris's quote-unquote defense team, and by that I mean mother, sister, and other deluded lovers and friends, was the notorious Pee Wee defense, taken from Pee Wee Herman. I know you are, but what am I? It had become popular all across social media to use false equivalencies, such as, yes, Chris Watts is a murderer, but Shanann is a narcissistic piece of trash. Or, yes, Chris Watts is a murderer, but Shanann is a pedophile who deserved it. These are false equivalencies that were happening then, and they still continue to this day. Cadle, though, took a different approach to Watts' jailhouse religion. She both believed and promoted the idea that Chris had been demon-possessed, presumably because Nicole Kessinger is a quote-unquote witch who cast a spell on him. When Cadle announced her upcoming book on Critical Case Channel, it was as if the two of them were trying to take credit for a new and improved version of the Gospel of Truth. This is not credit they deserve. There was no new story. Scott Reich did not specifically state that the unscientific lie detector test actually caused the first false confession, but his aforementioned video sparked the idea in my mind that law enforcement cannot expect the truth out of people when they themselves lie to those same people. There has to be a better way than this, I think. Chris isn't getting out of prison whether he tells the truth or not. His jailhouse religion is false. He has not told the truth. He has not been forgiven. And if he is waiting for angels to unlock his jail cell, he can wait forever. I have not read Ann Howard's book, and I do not know her ultimate message to her audience. But unless Cadle had the identical message, it is particularly egregious to take someone else's religious or non-religious message and twist it to your own agenda. For illustration purposes, let's suppose Ann Howard was a religious woman who believed in angels and miracles. In her naivety, she believed angels could unlock prison doors. But after years of research and interacting with serial killer William Devon Howell, who is the man she wrote her book about, she changed her mind and became an atheist. Then along comes Cadle, who is inspired by Howard's belief that angels can unlock prison doors, and decides to write a book about Chris Watts. I'm not saying this is what Cadle did or ever thought to do. I am just saying you can't take other people's message and use it for your own agenda. Cite your sources. and let the readers determine if Howard meant the words in the context that you used them, Ms. Cadle. Honestly, I do not know what Howard's ultimate message is, but according to YouTube creator Armchair Detective, she has already purchased Cadle's book and is very unhappy with it. The delusion of angels opening up prison cell doors is taken from an episode of Evil Lives Here titled The Son of the Prophet, which is about a murderer named Michael Ryan who introduced his son Dennis to a cult who was involved in the murder somehow himself, although I just don't recall the exact story. But anyhow, Michael Ryan told his son Dennis that the angels were going to open up the prison doors at any time while the two of them were in prison, and his son Dennis believed his father, and went on Evil Lives Here to tell his story. So this concludes my video on Cadle's plagiarism. Please visit my YouTube channel for other videos on the Watts case, and please like and subscribe. Thank you.